As photographers, we could have the perfect light, the perfect subject, a Leica, a Hasselblad, whatever camera you wanted. And even with all of that, if we mess up our frame dynamics, our images are just going to feel a little bit meh. And I think that frame dynamics is actually the secret sauce behind what turns a good photo to a great photo. So, what is frame dynamics? Simply put, the edges of our frame influence the look and feel of our image. And this is to do with how the shapes, the lines, and our subjects interact with those edges, ultimately creating what feels like energy, tension, or even flow through our frame. And these are the things that make our photos become highly engaging. And so it's not just what's inside the frame, but it's how what's inside the frame interacts with the frame itself. And so I found it a little bit weird when I was searching frame dynamics. There doesn't really seem to be that much on it on the YouTube space, which I find quite mad. And so it is my goal to try and share some of these concepts, what to avoid, and things that we can do with ease to help our images feel just a little bit more alive. And a quick caveat, some styles of photography really lean into the opposite of everything that I'm going to say. And that makes images feel raw, rugged, rough, however you like it. So shoot what you want to shoot, and this is just one style of photography. And so if you don't know who I am JP. I am a full-time professional photographer, and I create content for the biggest brands around the world. So let's start with strong, stable alignment. So if our subject has strong horizontal or vertical lines, such as buildings, we can align them to the edges of our frame, and this creates a sense of order and stability. Or we can go down the opposite route and we can completely disregard horizontal as being horizontal, vertical as being vertical. And I actually wrote about that in my book, Street Tools. And so if you want to learn more, in most of our images, the horizon line is probably our most prominent line. Everything kind of leads off that because of perspective and so on. So if we deliberately kick that out from being horizontal, it creates a sense of instability or energy, which is great for creating a mood of uncertainty, such as in racing. It's like, who's going to win this race? But a little tip, it cannot be subtle. We have got to be deliberate and intentional for this to work. And so this kind of leads into diagonal lines. And in every single 10 composition techniques video, we always hear about diagonal lines. But what are they? Why does it matter? So we all know that horizontal and vertical lines create stability. Diagonal lines create energy, in the most simple term, right? And so it sounds stupid, but in many cases, let me screw this on. In many cases, diagonal lines were once vertical or horizontal lines, and through a unique perspective or viewpoint, they then become diagonal. And because our minds are clever little things, it knows this. And this creates an unrealized tension or attraction that pulls the eye through the frame. And so from diagonal lines, we now get into aspect ratios. And these play a huge role in how someone views the scene. And most people, they just edit for Instagram. It's just 4:5 vertical. But it's important to understand how aspect ratios influence how we look at photos. So our eyes are drawn through the frame across the longest side of the frame. The longer the side, the higher the visual pull. So you look through the frame from up here all the way down there. That's the direction in which you look across this image. And so knowing that someone's going to look through the frame kind of across like this, we need to place our subjects throughout the frame, which will go into further detail in this, but enough about Street Tools. Right, and so knowing this, there will always be our main subject, and in our frame, let's just say it's me. And if I go off to this side, it feels like the weight is all over this way, right? I've got a little screen down here, hence why I'm looking off. But then there's nothing over here. That's a waste. The eye is going to get lost, bouncing around over here. And so we need to stretch the viewer's attention across the frame. And so what makes, I suppose in my opinion, a great photo is a combination of the subject and something else in the frame. And this is what I find is the magic of the photographer. It's about creating a story about the interaction of our subject and the rest of the scene. And we can create inferred diagonal lines between these subjects, thus adding even more energy to our images. And so whichever direction our main subject is in, we can place a secondary subject in the diagonal opposite corner across the longest theoretical line of the frame, making it feel engaging throughout. Let's do an example. Right, so I'm over here in the top corner. That feels like a way more full, interesting frame compared to this, right? And that's barely changing anything. So think diagonals when placing subjects through your frame. And a quick tip, if you are using Lightroom, if you go into the crop tool and you press the O key whilst cropping, then you can cycle through a bunch of different compositional guidelines, I think. And I always like to use the diagonal lines crop ratio thing. Just feels great. And not only that, whilst this is a bit more of a camera orientated skill, we can still build on it in post. We want to remove as many distracting elements of a scene as we can, so that the only thing that's contained within the frame is exactly what we want the viewer to look at. And this can be from random things that just crop just into frame and don't add to the story. So, I mean, roasting my own setup here. That, if I could crop it out, I would crop it out. That, if I could crop it out, I would crop it out. And so we just want to remove things that don't add to this story. Because having a tight, intentional frame uses the edge to stop the eye escaping through dead space or unimportant elements of the scene. And typically, how I like to edit my photos, I like to just slowly crop in, tighter and tighter and tighter, trying to fill the space with exactly what I want the viewer to look at, to keep them eyes locked in. But you might be saying, yeah, JP, whatever, mate. What about negative space? And yeah, I agree. Negative space is a great tool for conveying a sense of spaciousness, peace, openness, and it allows our subject to capture more of the attention. Because imagine if I'm the only thing in the frame and there's nothing else behind. Your eye can't look anywhere other than me in this case, which now feels a little bit weird. But try and think of it as negative space are the quiet parts of a song that help make the loud parts feel louder. And we can create this by loosening up the edges of our frame in the direction in which we want to feel the space. Often this is kind of pushing up towards the sky, because the sky is light, airy, peaceful. However, if there is too much negative space that doesn't add to the story, doesn't add the sense or the feeling that we're looking for, this creates dead space. And this is where the frame feels empty and not intentional. And I suppose more importantly, this gives the viewer's eye the ability to escape. And it's often things that are like the pavement or the sidewalk or random buildings that allow the eye to just wander off. We want to try and remove as many of them as possible. And so let me know what your thoughts on frame dynamics are. If there's anything that I've missed, any ideas that you have had. These were just what I came up with. And so if you've got anything else to add, feel free to chuck them in the comments below. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. See you again soon. Peace.